Detective Kane's hands were shaking as he slid across the supermarket floor on his knees, and when he saw the crimson liquid spreading across the white tiles beneath his pregnant wife, his entire world stopped breathing.
I'm right here.
Lila! His voice cracked like thunder in the silent store. Lila, look at me! Are you hurt? Is the baby okay? She was crying, clutching her swollen belly with both hands, her whole body trembling. Red sauce, pasta sauce, he realized with a flood of relief, covered her jeans and the floor around her like a crime scene. Her purse was torn open, groceries scattered everywhere, and she looked up at him with eyes full of terror and pain. I think so, she sobbed, gripping his arm so hard her nails dug into his skin. Kane, I fell so hard. I was so scared. The baby. Shh, I've got you, Kane whispered, pulling her close, but his eyes were already scanning the store like a predator hunting prey. Now let me back up and tell you how we got here, because this story is about what happens when you mess with the wrong man's family. Meet Kane Mitchell, 34 years old, living in Riverside, California, and he's got a problem. A big one. See, Kane isn't just some random guy. He's a decorated detective with the Riverside PD, the kind of cop who's taken down drug cartels, busted human trafficking rings, and put serial killers behind bars. He's seen the worst humanity has to offer, and he's built a reputation for being calm, controlled, and absolutely ruthless when it comes to justice. But here's the thing about men like Kane. They've got a switch inside them. And when that switch flips, when someone threatens the people they love, all that control goes straight out the window. And on this lazy Sunday afternoon in March, someone was about to flip that switch. Fam, if you're loving this story already, please subscribe, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. We'd love to know how far this story is traveling. Now grab your popcorn, because what you're about to hear will question everything you think you know about justice. If you've done that, let's begin. So anyway, let me take you back to how this whole mess started, because it was supposed to be a good day, you know? Just a regular Sunday. Kane and his wife Lila had rolled up to Save Mart around 2 in the afternoon. Lila was 7 months pregnant, glowing like the sun despite her swollen ankles and the waddles she'd developed over the past few weeks. They were doing the whole domestic thing, grabbing snacks, stocking up on ice cream, planning a movie marathon at home. Okay, we have the pickles, Lila said, squinting at her phone while Kane pushed the shopping cart through the sliding doors. But we forgot the Rocky Road ice cream. That's a non-negotiable, Kane. Kane chuckled, and man, when this guy laughed, it was this low rumble that came from deep in his chest. He was a big dude, broad shoulders, rough hands, the kind of face that usually didn't smile much because he'd seen too much darkness in his line of work. But with Lila, he was different, soft. Happy. I'm on it, he said, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze. Listen, I gotta hit the restroom real quick. Are you okay to wait here by the exit? I'll grab the ice cream on the way back to the register. I'm fine, big guy, Lila said, leaning back against the metal railing near the automatic doors. Don't take forever. Kane disappeared toward the back of the store, and Lila pulled out her phone, scrolling through baby name websites while she waited. Now here's the thing. Life can change in seconds, and Lila's life was about to change forever. About 2 minutes later, the peaceful hum of the grocery store was absolutely shattered. Outside, the aggressive revving of motorcycle engines made everyone in the parking lot jump. A dozen heavy bikes roared up to the curb, parking illegally right in the fire lane like they owned the place. The Road Reapers had arrived. These guys were Riverside's resident nightmare, a local biker gang known for causing chaos wherever they went. They were loud, dirty, smelled like stale beer and gasoline, and honestly they were looking for trouble because that's what they did every single weekend. They hopped off their bikes laughing and shoving each other and marched toward the entrance like they were invading foreign territory. At the front of the pack was their leader, this massive dude named Axel. He was wearing a leather vest covered in patches, skulls, flames, the whole intimidating aesthetic, and he was busy texting on his phone, not looking where he was going because apparently basic human awareness wasn't his strong suit. He walked straight through the automatic doors and slammed his shoulder right into Lila. Hey, Lila gasped, spinning around from the impact. She grabbed the railing to stop herself from falling. Watch where you're going. Axel stopped. The whole gang stopped behind him, clogging the entrance like a human roadblock. He looked down at Lila like she was an insect that had dared to speak to him. Excuse me, Axel grunted, his voice dripping with contempt. I said watch it, Lila said, and you could hear her voice shaking a little, but she stood her ground because Lila wasn't the type to back down. She put a protective hand over her baby bump. You almost knocked me over. I'm pregnant, Axel laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made your skin crawl. Cruel, ugly, empty. So, that ain't my problem, lady, he sneered. Move out of the way. Before Lila could react, before anyone could intervene, Axel shoved her. It wasn't a little nudge or an accidental bump. It was a hard, deliberate, two-handed push meant to hurt. Lila lost her footing completely. Her feet slipped out from under her, and she tumbled backward, hitting the hard tile floor with a sickening thud that echoed through the entire entrance. Her purse flew open, spilling makeup and receipts everywhere. The grocery bags at her feet tore apart, sending a jar of pasta sauce crashing to the ground and shattering into a million pieces. Red sauce splattered across the white tiles like blood. The gang erupted in laughter. One of them actually kicked a carton of eggs out of his way as they walked past her, and the eggs exploded against a display stand. "Watch your step, lady," Axel sneered, stepping over her legs without a single shred of guilt or humanity. They walked into the store, laughing and high-fiving like they'd just pulled off the funniest prank in the world. Lila lay there on the cold floor, tears streaming down her face, one hand clutching her stomach, terrified that something had happened to her baby. And that's when Kane walked out of the restroom. Kane didn't see the gang at first when he walked out of that restroom, and honestly, maybe that was a blessing because it gave him 2 seconds to process what he was seeing before the rage kicked in. He just saw the crowd of people gasping near the entrance, their faces twisted in shock and horror. He saw the crimson liquid spreading across the white tiles, and for one heart-stopping moment, his detective brain screamed that it was blood. And then he saw Lila sitting in the middle of it all, crying and holding her stomach, and the friendly husband who'd been joking about ice cream just minutes ago completely disappeared. In a split second, he became Detective Kane Mitchell, the man who'd taken down cartels and hunted serial killers through the darkest corners of California. He didn't run. Running would have been too slow, too panicked. He moved with terrifying purpose, crossing that store in seconds, sliding on his knees through the mess on the floor like he was arriving at a crime scene. "Lila!" His voice was tight, controlled, but you could hear the fear underneath. "Lila, look at me. Are you hurt? Is the baby okay?" I think so," she sobbed, clutching his arm like it was the only solid thing in the universe. "I just fell so hard. Kane, I was so scared." "The baby." Kane helped her sit up, his hands gentle but efficient, checking for injuries the way he'd been trained. His eyes scanned her body for bleeding, for swelling, for any sign that their unborn child was in danger. When he realized the red liquid was pasta sauce and not blood, relief flooded through him for exactly half a second before it was replaced by something else entirely. Pure, white-hot fury. His eyes scanned the store like a sniper acquiring targets. He saw them, the leather vests, the swagger, the Road Reaper patches, heading down the beer aisle like they owned the place, still laughing about what they'd just done. Kane stood up slowly. His face was completely blank, and anyone who knew him would tell you that was scarier than if he'd been screaming. When Kane went quiet, when his expression went dead like that, it meant someone was about to have a very bad day. His fists clenched so hard his knuckles turned white, and you could see the veins popping in his forearms. He took one step toward the beer aisle, then another, and in his mind, he was already calculating exactly how he was going to break every single bone in Axel's body, right there in the condiments section. "Kane, stop!" Lila grabbed his hand with both of hers, yanking him back. She knew that look. She'd seen it before when he came home from particularly dark cases. She knew exactly what her husband was capable of. "Don't. Please. Not here. If you fight them, you'll get arrested or suspended or worse. I just want to go home. Please, baby, just take me home." Kane froze. He looked at the bikers, and his detective brain started working, memorizing every detail. Their faces, their patches, the way Axel walked with that arrogant limp, the visible tattoos on their arms. He was cataloging everything like evidence, filing it away for later. Then he looked down at his wife, terrified, and covered in pasta sauce, and he made a choice. He let out a long, shaky breath and forced his hands to unclench. "Okay," he said quietly, and his voice sounded hollow. "Okay, let's go home." But here's what Lila didn't see in that moment. She didn't see the cold calculation that had replaced the rage in Kane's eyes. She didn't see him pull out his phone and snap a quick photo of the gang's motorcycles in the parking lot, zooming in on the license plates. She didn't see the small, dangerous smile that flickered across his face for just a fraction of a second. Because Kane Mitchell was a detective, and detectives don't get mad. They get even. The rest of the evening, Kane was the perfect husband. He helped Lila into the car, drove her home carefully, and spent the next few hours taking care of her like she was made of glass. He cleaned the pasta sauce off her clothes, cooked her favorite dinner, chicken parmesan with extra cheese, and set her up on the couch with a blanket, pillows, and her favorite streaming show queued up and ready to go. He checked on her constantly, bringing her water, adjusting the thermostat, asking if she needed anything. Around 11 p.m., Lila finally drifted off to sleep, exhausted from the stress and fear of the day. Kane stood there for a moment, watching her breathe, one hand resting protectively on her belly. He kissed her forehead softly, and then he whispered something that would have terrified anyone who heard it. "I'll be back soon." He walked to the garage, and this is where the story gets real interesting. Because Kane didn't put on his police uniform. He didn't grab his badge or his service weapon or anything that would identify him as law enforcement. Instead, he put on black cargo pants, a black hoodie, and heavy tactical boots, the kind of outfit that swallowed light and made you disappear into shadows. He grabbed a pair of thick leather gloves and a crowbar from his toolbox. He didn't take his gun because he wouldn't need it, and besides, guns made noise, and noise attracted attention. Kane had spent 15 years as a detective. He knew where every criminal organization in Riverside operated, and he definitely knew where the Road Reapers hung out when they weren't terrorizing innocent people at grocery stores, a dive bar on the edge of town called the Rusty Sprocket. It was the kind of place where dreams went to die, peeling paint, broken neon signs, and a parking lot that always smelled like vomit and regret. The perfect headquarters for a gang of lowlifes who thought they were untouchable. Kane drove his personal truck, an old Ford that didn't have any police equipment or identifiable features, and he parked it a full block away where the streetlights were conveniently broken. It was 2 a.m, and the street was dead quiet except for the muffled sound of music coming from inside the bar. He walked around to the back of the building where the electrical fuse box was mounted on the brick wall. With a quick yank of the crowbar, he ripped the metal panel open like it was made of cardboard and cut the main power line with a pair of wire cutters he'd brought specifically for this purpose. Inside the bar, everything went pitch black. The music died mid-song, and you could hear glasses crashing to the floor. "Hey, who didn't pay the electric bill?" someone shouted inside. Lighters started flicking on, casting tiny circles of orange light that barely penetrated the darkness. Kane slipped in through the back door, which he'd unlocked earlier that week during a routine patrol. Always good to know your exits, he'd learned in the academy. Now here's the thing about Detective Kane Mitchell. He wasn't just some angry husband looking for a fight. He was a trained tactical officer who'd served 3 years in the Marines before joining the police force. He knew how to move in the dark. He knew how to strike fast and disappear faster. And most importantly, he knew exactly where to hit someone to make them regret every decision they'd ever made. It wasn't a fight. It was a systematic dismantling. In the darkness, Kane was a ghost. He moved through that bar like death itself, and one by one, the bikers started dropping. You'd hear a pool cue snap, then a body hitting a table, then someone screaming. They couldn't see him, but Kane could see just enough. His eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and he knew the layout of the bar from memory. Within 5 minutes, the emergency lights finally flickered on, bathing the room in a dim red glow that made everything look like a horror movie. The bar was absolute chaos. Bikers were groaning on the floor, nursing broken ribs, dislocated shoulders, shattered noses. Pool tables were overturned. Chairs were smashed. It looked like a tornado had ripped through the place. Only one person was left standing. Axel. He was holding a knife with a shaking hand, looking around wildly like a cornered animal, his tough guy persona completely shattered. Kane stepped out of the shadows near the back hallway, and in the red emergency lighting he looked absolutely massive, like some avenging demon that had crawled out of hell specifically to collect a debt. Who are you?" Axel stammered, and you could hear the terror in his voice. Kane didn't answer. He moved forward with that same terrifying calm he'd had in the grocery store, and before Axel could even think about using that knife, Kane slapped it out of his hand so fast Axel didn't even see it coming. The knife clattered across the floor and disappeared into the darkness. Kane grabbed Axel by the collar with one hand and slammed him against the wall so hard it cracked the drywall. "You were at the supermarket today," Kane whispered, and his voice was calm, conversational even, which somehow made it 10 times more terrifying than if he'd been yelling. Axel's eyes went wide with recognition and absolute horror. The pregnant lady? "That's my wife," Kane said, and those 3 words carried the weight of a death sentence. Axel tried to beg, his voice cracking with panic. "Look, man, I didn't Kane didn't let him finish. He delivered a single, calculated punch to Axel's gut that dropped the biker to his knees like a puppet with its strings cut, forcing him to bow in the exact spot where Lila had fallen just hours earlier. The poetic justice of it wasn't lost on Kane. He leaned down close to Axel's ear, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper but somehow louder than any scream. "If I ever see you or your pathetic friends in my town again, I won't be this nice next time. Do you understand me?" Axel couldn't even speak. He just nodded frantically, gasping for air, tears streaming down his face. Kane stood up, pulled a set of zip ties from his pocket, the kind police use for mass arrests, and casually secured Axel's wrists to the brass railing that ran along the bar. Then he reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag filled with Zaza that he'd confiscated from an old case months ago, evidence that had been scheduled for destruction anyway. He tossed it onto the table right next to Axel's head. "Oops," Kane said flatly. "Looks like you boys were having a party." He walked out the back door, pulled off his gloves, and disappeared into the night like he'd never been there at all. 2 blocks away, sitting in his truck, Kane pulled out a burner phone he'd bought with cash years ago for exactly these kinds of situations. He dialed 911, and when the operator answered, he disguised his voice slightly, deeper, rougher, like someone who'd been drinking. "Yeah, you might want to send a unit to the Rusty Sprocket Bar on Elm Street," he said, trying to sound nervous and civilian. "I was walking by and heard a bunch of screaming. Looked through the window, and it looks like some kind of gang fight went down. Saw a bunch of guys on the ground, and I'm pretty sure I saw Zaza on one of the tables. Thought you should know." He hung up before the operator could ask follow-up questions, crushed the burner phone under his boot, and tossed the pieces into 3 different dumpsters on his drive home. When Kane pulled into his driveway at 3:15 in the morning, he looked exactly like someone who'd been out for a late-night drive to clear his head. No blood on his clothes. He'd been careful. No scratches or bruises. He'd been efficient. No witnesses. He'd been smart. He showered, changed into his pajamas, and slipped into bed next to Lila without waking her. She stirred slightly, mumbling something in her sleep, and Kane wrapped his arm around her protectively. "It's okay," he whispered into her hair. "You're safe now. I promise." And for the first time since that afternoon, Kane Mitchell closed his eyes and slept peacefully. The next morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows. Lila woke up around 8:30 to the smell of bacon sizzling in a pan, and for a moment she forgot about everything that had happened yesterday. She just lay there, listening to Kane humming in the kitchen, and felt grateful. She walked into the kitchen slowly, rubbing her eyes and her sore lower back. Kane was at the stove flipping pancakes like he was auditioning for a cooking show, and he looked fresh, rested, and genuinely happy. "Morning, beautiful," he said, turning around with a huge smile and putting a plate stacked with perfect golden pancakes in front of her at the table. "How are you feeling?" "Did you sleep okay?" "Sore," Lila admitted, easing herself into the chair carefully. "But I'm okay. The baby's been kicking all morning, so I think we're both fine." "Good," Kane said, kissing the top of her head. "That's all that matters." He turned on the small TV mounted on the kitchen counter, and the local morning news was already playing. The anchor, a woman in a bright blue blazer, was speaking with that serious tone news anchors use when they're reporting something dramatic. "Breaking news this morning from Riverside," the anchor said, and Kane casually sipped his coffee while Lila started cutting into her pancakes. "Police arrived at the Rusty Sprocket Bar early this morning to find the entire Road Reaper motorcycle gang tied up and incapacitated. Witnesses say the scene inside looked like a war zone." Lila's fork stopped midway to her mouth. Her eyes locked onto the TV screen. The camera cut to shaky footage from someone's phone showing police officers leading bikers out in handcuffs. They all looked absolutely wrecked. Black eyes, limps, arms in makeshift slings. Axel was being loaded into an ambulance on a stretcher, and even from the grainy footage you could see he was crying. The leader of the gang, known as Axel, was found crying and begging officers for police protection, the anchor continued, barely hiding her surprise. He told investigators that someone attacked them in the dark, though police say his story doesn't match the physical evidence. All members have been arrested on drug charges after officers found illegal substances at the scene, and several are facing additional charges for outstanding warrants. The camera zoomed in on Axel's face as paramedics loaded him into the ambulance. He looked absolutely traumatized, his eyes darting around like he expected someone to jump out of the shadows at any moment. Authorities are calling it gang-on-gang violence, though the investigation is still ongoing, the anchor said. The Road Reapers have been a problem in Riverside for years. So many residents are breathing a sigh of relief this morning. Lila's jaw had completely dropped. She looked at the TV, seeing the broken, terrified men who just yesterday had been laughing and high-fiving after shoving her to the ground. Then she slowly turned her head to look at Kane. He was calmly sipping his coffee, reading the sports section of the newspaper like he was checking baseball scores, completely unbothered. "Kane?" Lila asked suspiciously, her voice soft. He looked over the top of the paper, and his eyes had this tiny twinkle in them, the kind of look someone gets when they know a secret. "Yeah, hon? Did you do something?" Kane set down his newspaper and coffee cup, and he looked at her with the most innocent expression you've ever seen. "Me? Babe, I've been here all night. You saw me. I made you dinner, we watched TV, and then we went to bed. I didn't go anywhere." Lila watched him for a long moment, searching his face for any crack in that innocent facade. But Kane was a detective. He'd interrogated hundreds of suspects. He'd learned from the best liars in the world, and he knew exactly how to keep his face neutral. "Must be karma," Kane said, shrugging and picking his coffee back up. Karma's a real nasty thing when you mess with the wrong people. Those guys probably had it coming for a long time, don't you think? On the TV, Axel was still crying as the ambulance doors closed, and the reporter was interviewing a police spokesperson who confirmed that the entire gang would likely be in prison for years based on the evidence they'd found. Lila looked back at Kane, then at the TV, then back at Kane again. She saw the man who'd held her so gently last night, who'd cooked her breakfast this morning, who hummed while making pancakes. But she also saw something else in his eyes, something protective and fierce and completely unapologetic. And slowly, very slowly, Lila smiled. She took a bite of her pancake, chewed thoughtfully, and nodded. "Yeah," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight of understanding. "Karma. That's exactly what that was." Kane smiled back at her, and for just a second, they shared a look that said everything without words. She knew, he knew she knew, and neither of them was going to say it out loud because some things are better left unspoken. "Want some more bacon?" Kane asked, already standing up to get her another plate. "Please," Lila said, and just like that, they went back to being a normal couple having a normal breakfast on a normal Monday morning. Except across town, Axel was sitting in a hospital bed handcuffed to the railing, flinching every time a shadow moved in the hallway, absolutely convinced that the ghost who destroyed his entire gang in the darkness was going to come back and finish the job. And honestly, he wasn't entirely wrong to be scared, because Detective Kane Mitchell had just sent a very clear message to anyone who might think about hurting his family. You can run, you can hide, but karma always finds you. And sometimes, karma wears tactical boots and moves like a shadow in the night. Now here's the thing, fam. You might think this story ends here, with the bad guys in jail and Kane and Lila living happily ever after. But see, that's not quite how the world works. Because what Kane didn't know, what he couldn't have known while he was flipping pancakes and playing the innocent husband, was that Axel had a brother. And that brother, he didn't care about karma or justice or doing the right thing. He only cared about revenge. But that's a story for another day. Because right now, in this moment, Kane kissed his wife, felt their baby kick against his hand, and believed that everything was finally okay. Anyway, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Drop a comment and let me know. Do you think Kane went too far? Or did those bikers get exactly what they deserved? Hit that subscribe button because trust me, Kane's story is far from over, and what's coming next is going to blow your mind. I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe out there, fam.